week had passed since Walter White first heard the impossible reports of blue meth resurfacing across the Southwest. His body was healing, but only just. Every morning began the same way, a fit of coughing that left dark streaks of blood on an old handkerchief, a harsh, unavoidable reminder that the cancer inside him hadn't stopped simply because he'd escaped death at Jack Welker's compound. The bullet wound in his side had begun to close, but every twist, every sudden movement still sent a dull ache radiating through his ribs. He knew, with the same cold clarity he applied to everything, that time was working against him from two directions now. If the cancer didn't finish him, the DA eventually would. And yet, strangely, neither fear occupied his thoughts anymore. His mind stayed locked on one question that simply refused to let go of him. Who had recreated the impossible? Walter spread a collection of maps across the wooden table inside the abandoned cabin, newspaper clippings covering every remaining inch of surface space. Each article marked another seizure of blue meth, another arrest, another rumor bleeding out across the Southwest. Using a stub of pencil, he carefully circled every confirmed location: Arizona, Nevada, Western Texas, Southern Colorado. As the pattern slowly emerged beneath his hand, he noticed something the investigators themselves had completely overlooked. The distribution wasn't random. Every shipment moved along old freight corridors once used by independent trucking companies, deliberately avoiding the major interstates where DEA surveillance was heaviest. Whoever controlled this new operation understood logistics on a level most criminals never bothered to reach. They weren't reckless street dealers flooding a market for quick cash. They were patient, disciplined, highly organized, the kind of organization that didn't get built overnight. Meanwhile, inside DA headquarters in Albuquerque, the investigation had climbed to a level of urgency the building hadn't seen since the original Heisenberg case first broke years earlier. Agents worked around the clock, poring over old evidence, financial records, surveillance footage, and every known associate Walter White had ever crossed paths with. The working theory stayed simple, almost stubbornly so. Walter White had survived the compound, quietly rebuilt some version of his old empire, and vanished again before anyone could catch him. Few investigators believed anyone else on Earth possessed the knowledge to reproduce methamphetamine at that level of purity. Every new lab uncovered across the Southwest only hardened their certainty that Heisenberg himself had returned. Walter almost laughed when he caught the latest press conference crackling through his battery-powered radio. The DA believed they were hunting him again. The irony wasn't lost on him. He genuinely knew less about this new blue product than they did. Whoever was responsible had achieved something even Gus Fring, in all his careful precision, had never managed. They had built a nationwide network without revealing a single face. No witnesses describing a mysterious chemist. No intercepted calls leading anywhere useful. No financial trail pointing toward a kingpin at the center of it all. Every courier arrested claimed to know only one person above them in the chain, and that person invariably turned out to be just another disposable middleman, easily replaced, easily forgotten. The organization had been built in layers like insulation, protecting whoever sat at its center from every angle. Walter recognized the strategy the moment he understood it. It wasn't his style. It wasn't Gus's either. It belonged to someone who had studied every mistake both men had ever made, and had deliberately, methodically, avoided repeating a single one of them. Hundreds of miles away, Jesse Pinkman was hiding under a false name in a small town near the Colorado border, working odd construction jobs, renting a cramped trailer on the edge of town, speaking to almost no one if he could help it. He wanted silence more than he wanted freedom. Night after night, memories of Andrea, of Brock, of Mike and Hank and Jane, of the long months spent chained inside Jack's compound, crept into his sleep uninvited. He had promised himself, over and over, that he would never again let methamphetamine touch any part of his life. Then, one evening, while patching a roof alongside another worker, he overheard a fragment of conversation that stopped him cold. "You hear about that blue stuff showing up again?" Jesse froze mid-motion, hammer still raised. "They say it's even better than Heisenberg's." For the first time since escaping captivity, Jesse felt something closer to real fear than guilt. If someone else out there had gotten hold of Walter's formula, then the nightmare he thought he'd finally crawled out of was only just beginning again, for him and for everyone still out there who'd end up buying it. Back in New Mexico, Walter decided waiting on scraps of radio news was no longer good enough. He needed real evidence, something he could hold in his hands. Under cover of darkness, he drove into a small Arizona town where one of the recent seizures had taken place. Wearing glasses, a gray beard he hadn't bothered trimming, and a worn baseball cap pulled low, he passed easily as just another retired traveler working his way through town. The disguise wasn't perfect. Nothing about hiding from a nationwide manhunt ever is, but it was enough to slip past casual recognition. His first stop wasn't a drug dealer or a criminal contact. It was the local newspaper archive. Old habits returned to him with unsettling ease. Walter spent hours hunched over arrest records, police reports, and shipping manifests. The same meticulous focus he'd once brought to yield calculations now aimed at something else entirely. Buried inside a short article about a warehouse fire, he found it, something unusual. 3 weeks before the very first blue meth seizure, an abandoned chemical distribution warehouse outside Phoenix had been burglarized. Nothing expensive had been taken. Instead, the thieves had walked off with laboratory-grade glassware, industrial filtration systems, and rare chemical catalysts most people wouldn't even recognize by name. Any ordinary detective would have written the whole thing off as industrial vandalism. Walter recognized it instantly for exactly what it was. Someone had equipped an advanced laboratory. His investigation pulled him further south, into rumors circling around a mysterious supplier known only by the nickname the Broker. No one claimed to have actually seen the man. Some dealers weren't even convinced he was a real person. Instructions came through burner phones, dead drops, and anonymous cash deliveries. The product always arrived exactly as promised. Payments were collected without a single meeting, and mistakes were punished swiftly and without warning. It reminded Walter of Gus Fring's discipline in almost every way, except for one critical difference. Gus had valued loyalty above nearly everything else. Whoever had built this new organization trusted no one at all. While Walter pieced together fragments of the mystery from one direction, Jesse, without realizing it, had begun following the exact same trail from another. His motivation, though, couldn't have been more different. He wasn't hunting the new operation to reclaim anything or settle a score. He wanted to burn it down before another generation of addicts got pulled under by the same blue crystal that had already ruined so many lives around him. Quietly, without telling anyone, he left Colorado and drove south into Arizona, chasing whispers instead of hard evidence. Fate, indifferent as ever, brought both men to the same small truck stop outside Flagstaff on the same rainy evening. Walter stepped into the roadside diner only moments before Jesse pulled into the same lot across the pavement. Neither man had any idea how close the other one was. Walter took a seat alone near the back, listening quietly as two truck drivers at the counter discussed unusually large cash payments for hauling sealed containers across state lines. Jesse came in through the opposite door minutes later, hood pulled low over his face, and ordered a coffee he barely touched. For nearly 20 minutes, both men sat inside the very same room without ever seeing one another. A cruel, almost unbearable reminder of just how tangled their lives still were, no matter how hard either one tried to pull away. Walter followed one of the truck drivers out once he left the diner, trailing at a careful distance along the dark, empty highway until the trailer finally rolled into an isolated freight yard. Hidden behind towering stacks of shipping containers stood several unmarked delivery trucks. Workers moved sealed barrels under armed guard, every exterior light deliberately switched off. From a nearby hillside, Walter watched through a pair of borrowed binoculars, and almost immediately, something about the whole operation set off alarm bells in his mind. The men weren't handling the chemicals like street-level criminals. At least two wore their respirators correctly, fitted and sealed the way a real lab technician would. Another crouched beside the barrels, carefully checking temperature gauges before authorizing the next shipment to move. Someone with genuine scientific training was supervising this. Walter's heartbeat quickened in his chest. This wasn't an imitation laboratory. This wasn't some amateur trying to fake his way to a payday. This was a professional operation. Someone out there understood chemistry almost as well as he did. Before he could gather anything more, headlights suddenly swept across the hillside behind him, cutting through the dark. Security vehicles were already climbing the dirt access road, moving straight toward his position. Walter realized in an instant that he'd been spotted. Grabbing his binoculars and backpack, he scrambled through the rocky terrain despite the sharp, tearing pains still living in his side. Gunshots cracked through the night air, striking the dirt only a few feet from where he'd just been standing. He threw himself behind a jagged cluster of boulders, barely avoiding a second burst of fire. The chase dragged on for nearly 20 minutes before Walter finally slipped free into the surrounding desert darkness, exhausted, shaking, but alive. The encounter confirmed everything he'd feared from the very beginning. This organization wasn't simply manufacturing blue meth in some hidden trailer. They had trained security, advanced logistics, professional chemists, enough resources to monitor every possible approach to their facilities, day or night. Whoever stood behind the broker had built something designed to survive even if individual labs were discovered and shut down one by one. The following morning, Walter made it back to the abandoned cabin carrying only a single piece of physical evidence recovered during his escape. Wedged between the rocks where one of the guards had slipped during the chase, he'd found a small laminated identification card, dropped and forgotten in the struggle. No photograph. No name. Only a stylized blue phoenix rising above a single line of printed text. Phoenix Chemical Solutions. Walter had never heard the name before in his life. And yet something about the clean, professional print on that card told him immediately it wasn't fake. For the first time since escaping Jack Welker's compound, Walter finally understood the true scale of what he was actually facing. This wasn't a copycat cook working out of some RV in the desert. This was a corporation hiding in plain sight behind the appearance of a legitimate business. And somewhere inside that organization was the person who had reached in and stolen the Heisenberg formula for themselves. As Walter sat staring at the card by lamplight, hundreds of miles away, Jesse unfolded a newspaper in a quiet motel lobby. On the back page, tucked beside the classifieds, sat a small advertisement for a regional chemical supplier expanding its operations across Arizona and New Mexico. The company logo was unmistakable. A blue phoenix. Neither man knew it yet. But they had both just found the first real clue pointing toward the very same enemy.